Welcome to Grow Her Wings, a podcast by the Malou Project, a 501c3 based in Jacksonville, Florida, with a mission to connect girls to aviation. We are your hosts, Jenn and Carrie, and we invite you to join us as we meet new people, talk to old friends, and learn new lessons on the path to inspire more of us to grow our wings.
Growing up, my father worked at the airport, and so we would go almost every single night to bring him dinner. When I looked up at the sky, I just remember thinking, what a magical thing to be able to fly. My parents were born in Zarzal, Colombia. They were immigrants, and they faced a lot of hardships. My father at one point had 2 jobs to support the family. My mother was a master tool and die maker, which was a fantastic job, but she had to work really long and hard hours. As a little girl, I didn't think that being a pilot was an option because I had never seen a Latina pilot.
My pleasure to introduce Airbus Captain Claudia Zapata-Cardone.
When I told my father that I got the captain upgrade, he started crying.
I love her so much. She is my pride.
We are so happy.
We are so happy the dream has come true.
I feel like I've achieved something beyond the American dream.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from the flight deck. Welcome aboard United Flight 1566 with service to Mexico City.
I make my announcements in English, and then I make them in Spanish.
Muchísimas gracias en Escuela United. Hasta luego.
The connection is immediate.
Sí, me encanta.
It's a shared bond, it's a shared language, and it's great when I walk on these flights and there's little boys and little girls that come up and ask me, can I be a pilot too? And I say, absolutely, you can. You can be a pilot. I want people to know that we have more that unites us than divides us. We all want the same things. We want to be safe, we want to be secure, we want to love and be loved. So what I would tell my mom and dad is that their hard work and all of their sacrifices, I'll never be able to thank them enough for that, because I was able to achieve that American dream that they came to this country for. I just feel like thank you will never be enough.
Good morning and welcome to the Malou Project podcast. We are a 501c3 based out of Jacksonville, Florida, focused on connecting girls to aviation. And today we have with us Miss Claudia Zapata-Cardone, who is a captain at United Airlines. Good morning, Claudia. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We are over the moon having you here. Unfortunately, Carrie can't join us, so it's just going to be myself and Claudia talking today. Carrie, who's a UPS pilot, just recently was diagnosed with COVID. So she's at home. She has had 18 tests in the last 5 months, and 1 actually has turned to be positive. So she's at home resting. But we'll be looking forward to having her again on the podcast with us soon. Okay, so Claudia, thank you again for joining us. It was amazing to meet you on LinkedIn. That's such an amazing platform for meeting amazing, successful women.
It is.
Yeah, connecting with like-minded people. So if you don't mind, would you share with us kind of a little bit of your current position, and then maybe give us some of your history and how you got into what you're doing?
Okay, great. Well, my name's Claudia Zapata-Cardone. I'm a pilot for United Airlines. My current position is a captain on the Airbus 320. And I got hired with United 5 years ago in 2015. So it's really been tempered lately with COVID and everything, as far as the excitement there.
Yeah.
The airline industry is in a little bit of a turmoil right now. And so it's just a kind of day-to-day thing that we're going, trying to figure out where we're going, what direction we're going to take this. And hopefully we're able to come up with some solutions to help the airline industry thrive.
Yeah.
I guess a little bit about how I got to this place in my life. I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and my dad, back in about 1983, got on with a company called Certified Freight Services, And that was part of People's Express. And then he became, People's Express kind of merged the company into them. And then about 1986, he got on Continental Airlines purchased People's Express. So he started working at Continental Airlines.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So every time we were lower middle class, and we really couldn't afford for my dad to go to the cafeteria, employee cafeteria, or, you know, go out and get fast food or whatever. So my mom would cook him dinner, and we would bring him dinner every night when he was working to the airport. And I would watch the airplanes take off and land, you know, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I thought it was just absolutely magical what was happening with the airplanes.
Yeah.
And so then when my dad got on with Continental in 1986, suddenly we had pass privileges and we were able to travel.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So my love for aviation just started a really long time ago. And, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was in high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I always thought about flying. I always thought about, you know, being a pilot, but I had never seen a female pilot up until that point. I mean, you got to remember, this is the 80s, early 90s. And I had never really seen a Latina pilot. And I just didn't think it was a possibility for me. In fact, when I mentioned it to a high school counselor one time, she pretty much laughed me out of the office. I mean, it was just ridiculous. That's this 5 foot, and I am 5 feet tall, would even think about being a pilot. And I know that, like, in the Air Force, I know there's height standards.
Yes.
But luckily, right, in the civilian world, it's just, if you are able to have full authority with the rudder pedals and all the equipment, you can fly.
That is so important, I think, for people to realize the difference there, that it's not like a height restriction, it's just ability to do it.
Right, absolutely. And so I went to college for a little bit, and I was studying, I think, to become a physical therapist. So I was taking all these science classes, and I really just wasn't passionate about it. And my parents were not going to suffer a fool that doesn't know what she wants to do with her life and just taking not meaningless classes, but taking, oh, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take these classes. So at that point, they were like, well, get a job, going out into the real world for a little bit, and then come back and decide what you want to do.
Nice.
And I ended up working at AirTran Airways in, 1995, the original AirTran Airways out of Orlando, Florida.
I was just thinking about ATA the other day and how I'm seeing them.
Yeah, well, I remember their call sign was Manatee.
Okay.
Little things that you remember. So I started working as a reservations agent. Then I went into the crew scheduling department, which, pilots out there will hear that and, just like, oh gosh, no, not crew scheduling. But I was a crew scheduler, and I started befriending some pilots there. And a couple of them took me up in a 172 kind of as an intro flight. Okay. And yeah, we flew from, I can't remember, Kissimmee. I remember this. We flew from Kissimmee to Orlando Executive. And it was amazing. And they let me, I had to use a seat cushion, but they let me fly, and they were teaching me straight and level flight, turns, and obviously they didn't let me land, but I had the bug. I wanted so much at that point to be a pilot. And they explained how to do it through the civilian route. But also through the civilian route at the time, there wasn't much movement just due to the industry back then. Everything in the 80s that happened, deregulation, the 80s, a lot of layoffs happened in the early 90s. So there wasn't a lot of movement. And again, it was very military focused.
Okay.
And so they said, well, the most you can hope for is to fly, at the time they used to call them puddle jumpers.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And now they're regional carriers. And I just thought, okay, well, I'd be willing to do that. But then when it came to the cost, I just thought there's no way. It's really expensive. Even now, even back then it was expensive, and even now it's really expensive to get all your certificates and ratings.
Yes. Yes.
So I ended up getting hired as a flight attendant for Delta Airlines.
Okay.
And I put that idea of being a pilot kind of tucked away, and thought, well, maybe I'll just get my private pilot and fly around for fun on my own. Yeah. And when I got to Delta, I started seeing more and more female pilots. And I would ask them, oh, how did you get here? And a lot of them were, oh, I was in the military, flying C-130s, or, you know, the myriad of airplanes that the military flies. But then I met a woman who was straight civilian.
Okay.
And she said, oh yeah, this is how I did it. And I was like, oh my God, I want to be a pilot. And she said, oh, let's sit down and let's, you know,
awesome.
draw out a roadmap. This is what you need to do. And this was probably about a year into flying. Took a few more years, but I was saving money, and I started taking flight lessons in March of 2001.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, we all know what happens after that.
Yeah.
And so my timing was, I would consider my timing being poor, in the sense of, you know, every time I went to do something, something would happen, a world event. And so it sent me back a few years.
Okay.
I finally got all my certificates and ratings in 2006 and started flight instructing. And I left my job at Delta as a flight attendant and continued flight instructing. And then in 2010, I got hired at one of the puddle jumpers, the regional carriers, ASA. I worked for them for 5 years, and then United hired me in 2015. So
yeah, that's amazing. And you know, that mindset of like, this is going to be a goal of yours, and not to allow those world events, as you call them, but anything that would have gotten in your way of it, you persevered, and that's amazing.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's a mindset, and I'm not going to lie and say that there weren't times that I wanted to quit. There weren't times that I took a break from flying, because that's not being honest. I did, yeah. But I always had that pull back. Like, you know, you're almost there. Just finish this. Just do it. And I would. You know, one of the things that happened was after 9/11, the flight school I was going to went out of business, and. Oh, wow. Right. So I had to continue working as a flight attendant, save up more money, and then get another rating. And then I would have to take a big break, to save up money again to get the next rating. So that's why it took so long. Yeah. And like I said, a few times in there, I just thought, this just isn't, I'm never going to achieve my goal. You know, I should just stop. But I would still save money. I would still save money. And be, well, I'm going to use that for something else. I'll just keep doing it. And then, of course, when I'm like, you know, I should just get that multi-commercial rating.
That's awesome. That's so great. Yeah.
But yeah, it's important to at least acknowledge that, yeah, I almost left aviation a few times professionally as a pilot. I was still a flight attendant, so I still got to travel the world. And there's nothing wrong at all with being a flight attendant. I absolutely loved my time as a flight attendant. I thought it taught me a lot. It taught me about the world, different cultures. But I just always had that pull to I wanted to be up in the flight deck.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had the thought of being a flight attendant to enjoy the travel and be able to you know, help in the back. I mean, that's a critical role.
It is. It's a safety role. Yes. And I think a lot of people sometimes forget about that the flight attendants are mainly there for your safety. Yeah. If you go back way into the beginning of aviation, a lot of the flight attendants were registered nurses.
Oh, wow.
Because they needed to be able to assist the passengers in case they got sick, anything that could arise. And even back in the days of early aviation, the safety obviously has increased a million timefold. I mean, we're so much safer now than we ever were in the past. But so, yeah, being a flight attendant is a very important safety role, but there's so many perks along with any job. There's those perks that, you know, I got to visit Paris, visit Munich, visit Rome, Venice, all these wonderful countries, Buenos Aires, Santiago, Lima. I mean, it's just so wonderful. And so I would never discourage somebody from being a flight attendant. Yeah. I was one, and I loved the job, but definitely just that desire to be a pilot was just stronger than my wanting to stay as a flight attendant.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things that you mentioned that I kind of want to dig into a little bit. You were hired on at United in 2015, and you were I don't even know what it's called in the airline industry of promoted to captain.
Right. So
is that fast? Is that 4 years?
That is very fast, because at the time we were growing, and we were expected to expand until COVID-19. So it was very fast. I opted to take the first upgrade I could.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was promoted basically for a little over, 4 years and 4 months. And I started training in October, finished in November, and hit the line in November.
Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive.
It is. I'm,
dedication.
and a lot of the times women are just made to feel like they shouldn't be proud of their accomplishments, but this is something I'm very proud of, and I'm not embarrassed to say, yeah, I'm really proud of that. And really proud that, the training was fantastic, and really proud of just where I was, all those years ago to where I am today. But it is seniority based. I know some people might be wondering how I was able to take that promotion. It is seniority based. If you're senior, and that's a great equalizer, especially for women.
Yeah.
If your seniority can hold the position, and you bid the position and you're awarded the position, you are a captain.
Yeah. And that's amazing. That's great. It's all merit based. Absolutely. Sorry, something in my house was ringing. I don't know what was ringing. The other thing that you talked about was the cost, right? And I think that that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize is the expense, but also that there's a lot of things out there, a lot of scholarships, right? A lot of organizations.
There are so many aviation organizations out there that are giving away scholarships. So when I was going through this, and I mean, it was the early, era of the internet, there wasn't a lot of scholarships, and there were a few, but now if you type in aviation scholarships, I mean, so many wonderful scholarships come out there. Women in Aviation, Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, the 99s, the Milieu Project.
Yes.
There's a new organization called Women of Color that are giving away scholarships for women of color. There's Sisters of the Skies, Latino Pilots Association, the National Gay Pilots Association. There are so many wonderful organizations that are giving away scholarships to individuals that want to learn how to fly, and especially women. And I think that's just fantastic. In fact, I'm mentoring a young woman. Her name is Manuela Cortez. And she got every single one of her ratings through a scholarship. So she won. She's 26 years old. Absolutely love her to death. Her goal is to become an airline pilot. She just won a tailwheel endorsement scholarship. She's applying for her CFII endorsement, and she texted me the other day and said, "Would you mind writing me a letter of recommendation?" I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
And it's so important for women to mentor other women, to support other women, and to lift each other up, and to network, because these are the kind of connections that will carry you through your career. You can turn back to these women and say, "Hey, I just experienced blah, blah." "Oh yeah, this is how I handled it." And I mean, that's just, that I would say that's in any job, but it's especially important in such a male-dominated industry for women to have the emotional intelligence to identify their emotions and be able to say, "Okay, let me bounce this off somebody else. Let me see how I can work through this." And I think people shy away from emotional intelligence, thinking and immediately will stereotype women as being too emotional. I would argue no. I think women are very fantastic multitaskers that are able to absorb the information in a few seconds and analyze it, and this goes for type A personalities as well, but be able to, effectively execute a plan.
Yes.
And so that there's a lot of like I said, the emotional intelligence to really make that come together and work.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in there. The whole thing about, I think when I was younger, I was kind of afraid to approach some of the women in my own career field to ask them about like what they were doing with things, if they had experienced them. It was almost like I was a little bit embarrassed to say that I'd experienced something, and I just didn't want to share it because I thought that maybe it would make me less of a pilot, or I'd be judged, or I didn't think that maybe they had experienced it because, I'm me and they're them and they're just great pilots. But it feels like more recently, modernly, we are getting into this like understanding of, look, we've got to talk about things.
Right.
It only makes us all better as a community.
It does. I think there's this perception that and I'm not sure, I'm not a man, but there's this perception that men never ask for help. Men never, mentor other people. And that's not true. They may talk about it in a different manner, but they've been helping each other out for a very long time. And I don't know if it was like messaging that we got that, and I think you posted something a few weeks ago, and that's how we connected.
Yes.
About you have to be one of the guys, you have to be one of the bros in order to make it. And, that is a messaging that you get very early on in your flight training. You got to be one of the guys, you got to be able to joke around with them and not get easily offended with anything that might be said. And that's just the way it is. And I would like to say it shouldn't be like that. Everybody should be welcoming. It should be welcoming.
Yeah.
And I know
what we need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been guilty of that too. I've been guilty of trying to downplay my femininity, of trying to be one of the guys so that I wouldn't be labeled as a troublemaker. So I wouldn't be labeled as someone that's just too high maintenance. All those things that are labeled to women and girls.
Or that we think we might get labeled with, because we've heard other people get labeled that.
Right. And it's my personal experience. I don't want to say it's a fact, but I hear women over and over say this, that I have to be 10 times, 20 times better than my male counterpart to get that kind of respect. And otherwise, so let's just say we all have bad landings.
Absolutely.
We all have landings that we look back and think, what happened? What was I doing? And for me personally, I can always go back to my landing and say, I forgot to look down the end of the runway.
Right. Yep.
I forgot. I got focused on the ground rushing up on me and, overcompensated and planted it into the ground.
Happens.
Right. It happens. And so the eye-opening thing was when outside of the flight deck and I would talk to other guys, they would talk about their bad landings and be like, yeah, I forgot to look down the end of the runway, but they would laugh it off. But if I did that, if I had a bad landing and I was a first officer, suddenly it wasn't, oh, she's just having a bad day. Suddenly it's like, well, is she able to do this? Is she, suddenly I was getting questioned.
Yes.
And the only reason I know this is my husband's also a pilot, and he worked at the same airline I did, and we flew with the same captain. My experience was 180 degrees from his experience.
Oh, wow.
My first landing was not the greatest landing. It was just kind of, and it just kept going downhill with the micromanaging. All of a sudden I'm getting instruction. It just became a very toxic environment. He had a bad landing and the guy just laughed it off. Oh, we all have bad landings. Don't worry about it. Shake it off.
So, and with that, I've thought about those kind of situations. And the easy answer is because he's a jerk. But the other answer is maybe he was trying to make you a better pilot. Maybe he really wanted you to succeed. And I don't know necessarily that person. Probably, you'll have to tell me better on that. But like, sometimes I just want to take myself out of that situation and just think,
right,
what is his motivation?
Right. So sometimes that is legitimate. And I will say that when I'm brand new in an airplane, absolutely. Even as a captain, I tell my first officers, I don't know all the answers. If I'm doing something that you do not understand why I'm doing something, if something looks wrong, you need to tell me, speak up. So that I can acknowledge it. I may start focusing on something and let something else go by mistake, not meaning to. We're all human. This is human factors. But when I've had, 4 years in an airplane,
yeah.
and you start trying to coach me, oh, this is what you didn't do. And I can take that and say, yeah, you're right. I'll try to do better next time. But then when it becomes, and there's a fine line there when it becomes excessive, when every little move you make is being questioned when you're supposed to be working together as a crew, and you're constantly getting criticized and not effective criticism, then that's when it starts to wear on you. That's when there's a breakdown in communication.
What do you recommend people do in those situations?
You know, it's so hard, and it's one of the, and you see, I was guilty of this back then too. I didn't confront the person. I just would go into my room at night, you know, our hotel room, and I would just seethe and vent to my husband. But, you know, with age comes wisdom. And, you know, now when something like that happens, you know, after landing, after the checklists are done, it's like, hey, you know, we now have to debrief. And I would recommend this for anybody. What you want to say is like, hey, I want to debrief this really quick. I feel like you were really focusing on like X, Y, and Z, and it's just become a bit much for me. I'm trying to figure out, am I doing something incorrectly? Was I not trained properly? And is there, is there something that I've missed? And try to open that line of communication with the person to figure out where you can meet and make this as less stressful as possible.
That's fantastic. I love the, like, was I not trained well? Is there something that I missed in my training that you have? Like, is there something that you want to pass to me?
Absolutely.
I think that's fantastic. Instead of making it about like, well, you know, you just hate me as a person. Well, there might be,
there might be other reasons.
Yeah.
I have a great example of this. So, we were coming into Washington, D.C. It was overcast, just cruddy weather. It was down to minimums. And they spaced us too closely, and Tower told us to go around. I was flying, and we heard the go around, our flight number, and I started going around. And the captain said, soft go around. And I had never heard that term. And you've been shaking your head like I've never, and I immediately got taken out of that sequence of, I'm going around, flaps 3, check thrust, positive rate, gear up, set, Mr. Approach altitude. I mean, those are things that we are like hammered on in training. This is how you go. This is a safe go around. So he said soft go around. I'm like, oh, what? And all he kept saying was soft go around, soft go around. And he's getting more agitated. And I'm like, what are you talking? It's my pitch. Are you talking about my pitch? What? Hold on, we need flaps 3. I need gear up. What are you talking? So then he took the airplane over. He said, my aircraft. And then we come back around. He gives me the aircraft back. We land, we pull up to the gate, and we do this shutdown checklist. And I said, okay, we have got to debrief this. What are you talking about when you're saying soft go around? And he said, soft go around, do you not know what that is? I said, no. And he said, it's when we put the thrust all the way into, toga, take off, go around, and then we immediately bring it back. Otherwise, you'll blow through your altitude. And I just, and I said, I've never heard that. So we kept discussing it, and we looked up in our flight manuals.
Nice.
And he's like, I know it's in here. And I'm like, I know I've never been trained this way.
Yeah.
So right there, that was a huge, he was trained in a manner that was years ago that you did a soft go around when you were at a certain altitude. So you didn't overshoot the altitude, so you wouldn't overspeed the aircraft. I had never heard that term. So that was a communicator receiver error right there. He was saying something that I had never heard a term for. I'm trying to now interpret what he's seeing, what he's talking about. I'm thinking soft go around, my pitch is too aggressive. I need to pitch down, but that's, oh no, my speed's like, what is he talking about?
Yeah, that's confusing.
So that's a great example of, he was trained in something that I wasn't trained in, and we talked about it. And when, we both filled out reports because you have to on a go around, and we filed a SAC report and everything. And they came back and said, yeah, we don't teach soft go arounds anymore. We haven't taught them in like,
Redeemed.
I haven't taught him in like
Redeemed.
15 years or something. And I was just like, oh, thank goodness, because I looked looked and looked and looked, and I talked to other people, and other people said, oh yeah, we used to teach that, but we don't teach that anymore. But when I got the official confirmation, yeah, I was like, yes, okay, I'm not a bad pilot.
Oh, that's fantastic. I had something similar very quickly where I was in the sim, and a friend of mine, I mean, we've flown together, we've been in several units together, and he's now a sim instructor. And I was going through my emergency procedures, and he takes all the hydraulics, and he's like, so what kind of jet do you have now? First of all, we're a helicopter, so I know that's confusing already, right? But he's like, what kind of aircraft do you have now? What kind of jet do you have now? I'm like, what do you mean, what kind of jet? Like, are you asking me, like, what model are we now? Like,
Yeah.
And being an instructor and knowing him for so long, I'm like, dude, figure it out. Like, what are you trying to ask me? Ask me a different way, because this isn't working. I'm not giving you an answer to this. And
Right.
the other pilot who's younger, he was trying to answer the question. I'm like, I'm not even gonna try. I'm just gonna fly. I'm, aviate, navigate, communicate. Like, I'm just gonna focus on this thing.
Absolutely.
You figure out what you're trying to ask me. But that's a great story. There was one that you shared with me when we talked, and I wanted to kind of ask that during this, because I thought it was really important to share. When you're, well, first of all, when you're a CFE, I love that you talked about, if you know, sometimes as an instructor, you're just not getting it across to someone.
Right. So we did talk about this.
And so, as the instructor turned around now, having that kind of like larger picture about, well, I might not be the right instructor to communicate what I'm trying to teach to you, and being humble enough to say that's okay. But being the instructor, or being the student, and if you don't mind telling that story again of being a student and not having the full authority.
Okay, absolutely. So I said earlier that all you had to do was have full authority of all the control services, and you could be a pilot.
Right.
So when I first started flying, I was getting very frustrated. We spent close to something like 25, 30 hours on landings and stalls. And I was just having, and coordinated flight, I was having a really tough time with some of these concepts that you're learning in private pilot. And I was just getting so incredibly frustrated. My instructor was getting frustrated. And we were just kind of at this impasse. And I just didn't know how to ask for the help that I needed. And being a new, again, those labels, I don't want to be labeled a troublemaker. I don't want to be labeled, high maintenance and all these other things.
Or unteachable, right? Or unteachable, because that's.
Or unteachable, right? That she'll just never get it. She's just not made to be a pilot. Well, he was very frustrated after a flight. I mean, it was just a terrible flight. We landed. He kind of threw up his hands, was like, I'm just going to put you and fly with another instructor and, see if they can communicate with you, or, teach you in a way that that you get this. I felt really horrible about it. I'm just completely down about this whole situation. And I'm thinking to myself, I saved up this money. I gave this flight school all this money, and it's going to be for naught. I'm not going to hack it. And they had very strict refund policies where you wouldn't get your full money back. And I'm just.
The pressure.
Wow. Oh yeah. I was just really demotivated at that point. So I get in the airplane and I'm on a 172 and I have a seat cushion. And the first thing, the instructor's looking at me, looking down, and he's like, hey, do me a favor, give me full right rudder. And I did what I thought was full right rudder. He's like, no, give me full right rudder. I'm like, that is full right rudder. I said, my legs won't go any further. He's a really good friend of mine now. I think I told you, he's like one of my best friends. He's about 6'3", and he puts in full right rudder. He said, do me a favor and give me full, put your leg where it stops. And I mean, I sank down so far below the glare shield.
Yeah.
And he said, your problem is that you don't have full rudder authority. We need to get you a different seat cushion. I needed more back support, pushing me forward to get full rudder authority.
There you go.
And that was it. That was like the ding, the magic moment. And after that, I didn't have problems using rudder.
You probably were even better of a pilot because you had all this instruction.
Right. And, that was moment where I was like, wow, all it took was another set of eyes to see that, hey, wait a second, this is the problem. They're not getting this. So I took that lesson with me when I became a flight instructor. If I was getting frustrated because no matter what I was saying, the student wasn't getting it, or they were getting frustrated, I always went back to them and said, let me put you with a different instructor. Sometimes they have a different way of saying something that clicks with the student. Sometimes they'll have a trick up their sleeve that they'll be able to show the student, and then the instructor will come back and say, hey, I did this demonstration with them and now they're doing this, much better. Oh, okay. So you have to put your ego aside. And sometimes I feel like there is a lot of ego because and I can understand that. It says, what kind of instructor am I that I can't teach my student? What does that say about me? But I think we need to turn it around and say, that's not always the case. You just, again, that communicator receiver error. You may be communicating something that the receiver is just not interpreting correctly. And sometimes you just need to change the communicator to have a better outcome. And there were several times where I was having a problem with a student trying to get them to like lazy, in the commercial, lazy eights and chandelles. I don't know if you do that in the Air Force. I'm sure you do.
We have, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yes. If for some reason I couldn't get them to understand something, I would try a different way. And I would try about 3 different ways.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't clicking, it wasn't a big deal. I would just go to another instructor and say, hey, do you have time on your schedule to fly with them and work on lazy eights? I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this. Oh, okay, no problem. And they come back and like, yeah, we did it this way, and they're, doing it. I didn't have a problem with that.
It makes you a better instructor because then you get that feedback. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It means that you're a good instructor that is willing to continuously learn from other people. Yeah. And when they would tell me their trick, I would put it away in my toolbox and say, I've never heard that. That's a way that I'm going to, if I have another student that, we're not gelling well, or we're having a problem with a maneuver, that's in my toolbox. I now use that. So for young women, I know it's very frightening to ask. It's intimidating to say, absolutely, but I would encourage you. I would remind my students, you are the customer. Nice. You're paying me. Yeah. You're the customer. Remember this, you are the customer. This is your career, your dreams, your passion, your desires. You are the customer. It is always okay to say to the instructor, hey, I'm really not getting this. We've done 2 flights on this. May I please, or not may I, I'm trying to be polite, but I would like to go up with another flight instructor to work on this to see if maybe they have a different way of teaching it that I'll understand. So.
Yeah, it's important absolutely to speak up. And I think it's great. I think it's a great lesson. And we all could fall the victim to our egos. And it's.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, there's there's been a couple of times where I was stung, like, ouch. Oh, and then, but I always have to go back to that. You know what? You're right. Absolutely. Let's put you with somebody else.
Yeah. And I really think, in this day and age too, in the age of Google and Wikipedia, where, we have the answers at the tip of our fingers, a lot of times it's hard to get yourself into that situation where, you don't know the answer and you can't solve a problem, as a student or as an instructor. And it's just having that humility and perspective of, it's fine. Like, I don't have to know everything.
Right.
All the time. Trying to ask a question or ask for help, because that's what makes us all better.
Absolutely. I remember being a child and being terrified of saying, I don't know. I don't understand. And it like still, sometimes it's still with me sometimes where I have to sit there and say, it's okay that you don't know the answer. You will be a better person if you ask the question. Yeah. Never be afraid to ask the question. I think it's just really a good lesson for especially our young
young girls who are in these situations to just speak up and say, you know what, I don't understand this, and I'd like for you to explain it to me. And it's okay to do that.
It is. It's
Demand
okay.
that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Claudia, you want to kind of like wrap things up a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about you and the associations you're a part of.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't mind just kind of sharing the organizations and things that are out there for people to get involved with.
Absolutely. There's so many wonderful organizations. I'm a director of outreach for the Latino Pilots Association. So our goal is to get more Latinx individuals into the aviation industry. Obviously, Women in Aviation is a fantastic organization. I just recommend everyone become a member of Women in Aviation. Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. They are also fantastic. I did a lot of work with them when I was going through my ratings. They have been such a wonderful support. So many of their members just supported me 100% through my journey. There's also, like I was saying earlier, the Women of Color Women of Color in Aviation. They are brand new, and they are also offering a lot of scholarships. Sisters of the Sky, and that is for Black female aviators, and the founders are all, the president right now is Teresa Claiborne, and she is a captain at United Airlines.
Yes, we had a podcast scheduled to record with her, and we will at the end of the month. We need to reconnect with her, but she was moving and just became.
She is such a wonderful inspiration. She really is. And then, I mean, there's just so many other organizations, but I'm also part of the Airline Pilots Association President's Committee for Diversity and Inclusion. And it's really amazing that this committee has been formed by our current union president, Captain Joe DePete. And he formed this last year, recognizing that there is a diversity, equity, and inclusion problem. Yeah. And so we're part of this committee trying to find ways to reach our members and reach other people and say, there is a space for you here.
Yes.
Yeah,
how does that look for, like, from your perspective? Do you think this will be something that will be very positive and successful?
Oh, absolutely. We really are. We're a brand new committee. He started the initiative last year, and the team got picked in February timeframe. So it's very new. Unfortunately, because of COVID, sure, we've been meeting remotely, and we got our strategic plan in place. Wow. And I really am looking forward to the positive change that this committee will make. I mean, it is getting everybody on board. The key piece here is data collection and education. Education is so important. And being an inclusive and being a very inclusive and open union where we can say to people of color, this is a place for you. For women, this is a place for you. For those that identify in the LGBTQI+ community, this is a place for you. There is a space for you here. So I am really excited of where we're headed with this committee.
And I think there's a huge opportunity, and that's a big reason Carrie and I started the Malou Project for girls, especially. Just, as we talked about in the beginning, the statistics of who, there's 1% you said are female captains.
Yes. So Dr. Rebecca Luty of the University of Omaha, Nebraska, she has done a lot of research into what motivates women in aviation or what draws women into aviation. And, the number one reason is a passion for aviation. They just have this passion in them. Yes. And it goes through different, the aviation profession is adventurous, it's fun, desire to prove personal abilities, and a desire for a challenging career. Those are really big motivators that draw women into aviation. As you were saying, exposing young girls, 54% of women that go into aviation were exposed at an early age as a child, and that influenced their decision to pursue a career in aviation. So that data, that education piece is just so important to reach these young women and say, there is a space for you here.
That's what's so exciting about things right now, like just getting out there to schools, clubs, associations, talking to the girls, being out there and right, because representation matters, showing them, and like your video in United that I will be posting along with this. So, just it's so important to show people that you exist and that they can do the same thing.
Absolutely. I've often said, I wonder what would have happened if I had seen a Latina pilot when I was a young girl. The seed of possibility might have been planted much earlier. I think I sent you Dr. Luty's. I would encourage you to contact her and have her on your show. Yes. She is just fantastic. And the importance of recognizing and encouraging this passion in young girls is also important, because a lot of the influencers, and you'll see that in Dr. Luty's slideshow presentation that she did for the FAA Women's Advisory Board to get more women in aviation. The influencers, parents played a really big role in this. And then there were some that I was a prime example, the guidance counselor that laughed when I said I wanted to be a pilot. Those are negative influencers. So it's trying to neutralize that and finding more positivity that will support these young girls in their dreams.
And to be fair to your guidance counselor, she was looking, or he was looking at it through his lens of what was possible at the time for anyone. Yeah. Absolutely.
And like I said, I'm sure the guidance counselor thought the only way you could become a pilot is to go through the military. I'm 5 feet tall, right. And he's probably looking at, or I think it was a she was looking at me just like, what are you doing?
Right. No. That's why, we had someone, Teresa Gathers, on one of our previous podcasts, and that is a great thing. And she says, write your own story. We can't let those kind of things from other people define who we are, because they are defining what's for them, and that's all. No matter what they say from their perspective, from their vantage point, it should not influence what we want to do. We have to have that, we have to write our own story.
That is really powerful, and I love that. Write your own story. Yes, you do have to write your own story.
And you are a great example of it. I'm so grateful to have you on today. Thank you, Claudia, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
We will be posting this probably in the next couple weeks. Make sure to have all this information that we've just talked about available for others to look at and to reference. And just a little plug for Malou Project for anyone out there. If you like our stuff, if you want to hear more of these kind of things, please like us below, or send us a message. Share these podcasts with your daughters, with your sisters, with your mothers, with your brothers, with everyone, because this is so important, all of this information. So thank you again, Claudia, for joining us.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome.